Float switch trips can cut power to the thermostat and make a perfectly good heating, ventilation, and air conditioning control look dead. So learn exactly how to float switches interact with the R wire and how to diagnose and fix it fast. Float switches sit in the condensate drain pan and open the R wire circuit when water rises. So first confirm whether the float is wired in series with the R power or using an isolated dry contact. If it is in series, you will see no 24-volt signal to the stat, and the display will be blank. So test for 24 volts between R and C at the air handler with the float both seated and lifted to reproduce the fault. If the system uses a dry contact relay, verify the relay coil receives power and that the relay contacts are closing. Measure continuity across the contacts rather than assuming the float itself is the issue. Replace brittle float leads and use stranded, high-temperature thermostat cable rated for the equipment cabinet to avoid intermittent opens from vibration. If you must maintain power to the thermostat for smart features, wire a separate fused 24-volt feed to the stat that is not interrupted by the float, and use the float only to trigger an auxiliary alarm or interlock the furnace control board using the appropriate low voltage input. Never defeat required safety interlocks without providing an alternate failsafe. For troubleshooting without a multimeter, temporarily jumper the float contacts with a paperclip while the condensate is clear to see if the stat powers up, but only do this for a brief, supervised test and never leave a jumper in place. Clean the condensate pan. Clear the drain line with a wet vac from the roof or service access. And install a condensate overflow sensor with an isolation relay so the thermostat can remain powered and a visible alarm or remote notification will activate on overflow. Consider adding redundancy. A secondary float switch downstream and a condensate pump with its own cutout will reduce single-point failure risk. Document the wiring change on the unit and update the homeowner service sheet so future technicians know whether the float is series or isolated. One of the biggest mistakes is assuming a blank thermostat means the stat failed instead of checking for lost R-wire power. Fix this by measuring voltage at the air handler and tracing whether the float is opening the circuit. One of the next common errors is jumper bypassing the float permanently to restore thermostat power, which defeats safety and can lead to water damage. Correct approach is to provide an alternate isolated power feed and separate the float to an alarm relay. One of the third frequent issues is poor cable choices or loose connections in the equipment cabinet that cause intermittent thermostat blanks. Remedy that by using proper stranded thermostat cable, secure screw terminals, and strain relief, and label all conductors so future troubleshooting is straightforward. BigHomeProjects.com lists trusted local contractors who understand these controls and can safely inspect and rewire floats and thermostats. The directory helps homeowners find qualified pros and helps contractors get vetted leads for this exact kind of control and safety work.